Today's sponsor of the Vision Quest podcast is 920 Hat Company. Leather patch hats are in, and 920 Hat Company is here to hook you up with your very own custom hat. All patches are lasered on top-grade genuine leather and on popular brand hats like Richardson and FlexFit. Whether you're looking to show off your business or want a one-of-a-kind hat for yourself, 920 Hat Company can do it all. All the hats are handcrafted right in the Fox Valley, but worn across America. With over 500 hats in stock, they guarantee fast turnaround times. Honestly, Liam, looking at these hats, solid, right?
Yeah, they're pretty. I like them.
I like that patch itself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one-of-a-kind stuff. I know his name's Trevor. He does great work. He's actually gotten I think we got a knit hat coming.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we got that coming. So we're really excited to have these guys on board as a sponsor. So get down to check them out on Facebook. I believe they're on Instagram. Check them out, man. They got the best hats, I think, in the Fox Valley, if not in the state.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So get down to 920 Hat Company on social media and check them out. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Vision Quest podcast. We have with us today, if you haven't heard of her and you haven't been paying attention to anything that's going on in wrestling, she was victorious at the U23 Worlds or not World Team Trials. Vegas. It was fun. It was exciting. We got to see you firsthand, which was even better. I have with me Emma Bruntil, current world team member. What weight was that again? Is it 65 or 68 this time, right?
Yeah, I had to bump up to 68 because I lost in the finals of the US Open.
Right, whatever. But you still came through. You came through and you did it there. You're like, no way, man. That was really kind of what caught my eye about you was, listening to the interviews. Like I said, I don't do a ton of stalking, but listening to the interviews that you had, it was like you had a goal. You had something in mind that you wanted to do, and it didn't matter. It's 65, 68. What's the difference, really? I mean, so you get to eat a little bit more, right? It's not as much cutting. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So let's do what we do. Let's start from the top. So you're from Washington State, right?
Yes. Yep. From Washington native.
Okay. What city?
I'm from this tiny town called Acme. It's about 30 minutes outside of Bellingham, but Acme itself is about 250 people, give or take. So very small, like farming community. I mean, we grew up we're 40 minutes from like a grocery store or like a hospital or anything like that. So pretty out there.
Right on. So I stayed out in a town called Aurora, Washington, which is, I did some factory work out there. We were doing some calibration, and I've never been more blown away by an environment of just the environment alone when you're out in nature out there by any other state that I've ever been to. I love North Carolina. That's where my heart belongs. But when I went out west, I was like, if I were in my 20s, I would be out here just killing it because it's absolutely beautiful out there. So you're talking farming community. Sure. So are you talking, you're working on the farms, there's the mountains in the background, like Mount Rainier, stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Rainier's in Seattle, but we grew up, I was like 45 minutes from Mount Baker, and my dad did ski patrol and stuff when I was like younger, and he's a really avid rock climber, and him and my brother both backcountry ski a lot. So we were always like in the mountains, always like doing stuff. I skied a lot as a kid because both my parents are skiers. Yeah. And then once later I rode horses competitively. So skiing was kind of like on the back burner. And then I got into wrestling. So yeah, it was, but my brother and my dad definitely ski a lot. And then he's the one who kind of got me into, like, I climb a lot of mountains and stuff in my free time. So he's the one who got me into that growing up.
So you're never really in any like fluff sports. Sounds like you're a lot of rough and tumble stuff for the most part of what you did for recreational things. So what were your first memories of any kind of like, I guess, outdoor activity? I consider most outdoor activities athletic. So any type, especially in Washington, what are your first memories of like doing something that was athletic outdoors? Was it that backcountry stuff your dad was taking you on the trails or things like that? You're working out in the farm?
It was young. It was really young. I mean, I remember we would do our hikes when we were little, and our parents would we of course were like 3 or 4 and we didn't want to like go hiking. So they would like hide M&Ms along the trail so that we would like keep hiking. And we went camping a lot, like multiple times a year. My grandparents had a boat, and I don't know if you've heard of the San Juan Islands, but they're outside of Seattle. They're super pretty. So they'd sail the boat, we'd go camp on the islands. And so I'd say we got into the outdoors, like, from the jump. And then we lived on property. So we always had to like work around the house, and we had like 13 acres. So we were, out there, like every time after a storm, we'd be like out in the yard picking up sticks so then we could keep mowing, or, mowing our lawn alone would take like 3 or 4 days. So we all had to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
nice.
We definitely lived on property from a young age.
Yeah. Well, and that's cool. So you, like I said, you weren't in really like any fluff sports. So with that being said, who was kind of the drive athletically? Was it dad, mom, or were they both really kind of behind you when it came to kind of pushing you a little bit?
Yeah, my mom was always, she always supported anything I did and would make sure that, I got to practices and really helped me with like the logistic stuff and getting to whatever I needed to go or doing what I needed to do. But me and my dad were the ones, even though he never wrestled and no one in my family wrestled besides me, we'd get up. I started wrestling my freshman year of high school. So every day at like 5 a.m. before I'd go to school, we'd get up and go work out in the garage. And yeah, he was definitely like a big driver. We'd train together a lot, even though it wasn't like wrestling specific stuff. And I remember one workout with him. We just like would do kind of crazy stuff. And we just were like, let's just see who can do lunges, like who can do the most lunges. And we were both in insane shape. I mean, I trained pretty crazy in high school. And so we were just seeing who could do the most lunges, and we got to like, it was a lot. It was like 620 or something. And neither of us, we just looked at each other and were like, neither of us are going to quit, huh? And I remember we both couldn't walk for like several days afterwards. It was pretty tough.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'd say my dad, like we did. And now like, we climb a lot of mountains together and stuff when we have time. So like we did Kilimanjaro in the fall after Worlds. And we have climbed some Colorado 14ers and then climbed some volcanoes and some mountains back home in Washington. So we do a lot of that stuff together.
So Worlds, then I'm just going to go ahead and climb a mountain while I'm at it. It's pretty cool. I got nothing else going on. So I just go over this mountain and climb it. So I'll tell you, when I was out there, because I was like, there are plenty of places I can go to be able to witness, see all this and be able to get to like a high point and see even more. So the hotel I was at, maybe a quarter mile away, is this little, what I call the little park. was not little, and I just started to climb, right? I'm this little Wisconsin dude, kind of fat at the time. I was probably about 240 and out of shape, and I started climbing. I get about halfway up. Now I understand that there's elevation and things like that, but you're like, well, I'm breathing fine right now, right? What's could be the problem? I got halfway up that hill and I was wheezing like I was a 2-pack a day smoker. And I'm watching this guy with his little girl on his shoulders, just walking up like it's nothing. So knowing what you guys were around and just the physical activity and whether you want to call it advantage or disadvantage of the area you were in, and then being able to go compete at some of these other places. I mean, did you find yourself kind of being once in a while at an upper hand just because of some of the things that you've been through athletically or competitively? Because, I mean, you're talking about back mountain climbing like it's just another day over at the picnic playing some soccer. So with that stuff, did you find that a little bit of an advantage coming into wrestling at your freshman year? What did it feel right?
Yeah, I mean, so I rode horses. That was the main thing I did. And then we would always do the outdoor stuff was just something we always did. Mm-hmm. So horses also, like, it's weird because you wouldn't think it would be a huge crossover, but I did like barrel racing and speed events. So you're going 40 miles an hour around like super sharp turns, having to like not only control yourself, but control another animal. Yeah, there were times there was one time in competition where my whole, so it's called a cinch. It's basically what keeps the saddle attached to the horse. Yep. My cinch broke like as I was going around the last barrel for a barrel race. And so pretty much the whole way back across the line, I'm just like hanging on. And then my saddle actually comes off, and after I cross the line, I let the saddle come off and just jump off. So I'd say like some of that stuff of just being really prepared for anything, performing in front of big crowds, and just having to keep your emotions in check because horses like pick up on everything. So my horse was pretty crazy. We would have to give him like sedatives before I would run because he would get so just jacked up. So basically I could never let my emotions run away with me because then my horse would, rear up or do something pretty wild. So, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't see how that would translate. But then you get in matches with people like Forrest where it's like, oh, you really have to stay calm, cool, and collected for not only 6 minutes, but then for 3 full matches of that. So I'd say it just translated more in the mentality aspect of things and like, just being very, I think, just being very determined and especially like the mountain climbing stuff. My teammates all think I'm like pretty crazy because I'll go do that on a Sunday and then go to practice the next day. They're like, I don't understand. But for me, I mean, when you've been doing it since you were a kid, it's like, I don't go every weekend, but quite a bit. And so it's just part of like kind of what we did growing up. And so I kind of try and keep doing it even now.
So like around here, when you text someone on like a Saturday, be like, hey, what are you doing today? Just kind of hanging out, gonna maybe go on the boat. Like you'd be responding with, no, I'm going to go climb Mount Rainier today. I'll be back in about 4 or 5 hours. And like, wow, I didn't even get out of bed yet. Like, so it is a little surprising, but it's awesome. It's so the thing with that is I think you're only setting yourself up for even more success, knowing that, if you're up in a mountain, number one, you can't freak out because, and I, for one, know I was getting followed by a coyote for some reason, but you can't freak out. You got to kind of know what's going on. You have to keep your wits about yourself. I mean, I'm sure there's been a time or two where you guys were out there and you're like, well, maybe we won't make it back. We may have to just camp, whatever for the night. And then we'll head, we'll be able to get back in the morning kind of thing. You don't freak out thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get back? We're never going to get back. You guys kind of know the deal. So how did that set, like as a young kid, like what was your first real competition sport coming up when you were like 4 or 5, was it?
Yeah. I mean, so my brother was a really big soccer player. He played like select soccer all through high school. And then he was actually going to play for like a D2 school near where we live, but he's a marine biologist. So super hard to be a marine biologist and do that at the same time. Yeah. So honestly, he's like, I always tell people he's more athletic than me. He's like, I'll come home and run him through like some of our agility drills or like just random workouts and he'll like crush me. So he, we kind of played soccer and kind of like all the normal sports, a lot of skiing, a lot of hiking and stuff. And then, I got into horses though when I was like 4. So that was like, and I started competing when I was like 5. I was super young. So, nice. My mom rode horses with her cousins on a ranch in Nevada. So she kind of did that in the summers when she was growing up, and she always wanted to own horses, but couldn't really do it till adulthood. So we kind of did that when I was younger. And then I found wrestling when I was 14, and I still competed actually for 1 year after I started wrestling, but obviously they're just two very like demanding sports. And so it's like, you can't really be good at both, but actually my first 6 state titles were all in horse related things, so not wrestling at all.
Oh shit. So you're not a slouch at anything you do. And that's kind of another thing that I took away from you is that, again, the bumping up. Well, I lost at this. Well, screw it. I'll go for this. It's that kind of that mentality of I want something out of this. No matter what. I'm getting something out of this shit. Yeah, for sure. Whether you're going to give it to me or not, I'm taking it. So that's kind of what I like is that kind of mentality. Cause that's me. That's kind of what I do too. It's like, no. Okay. Yes, actually that's what I'm going to do. So where did you, what does that come from? Mom, dad? Where do you think that comes from? It sounds like maybe a mix of both.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, something like my parents will tell you, like, I've just always been like that since I was a kid. Yeah. Like even when I was younger, like I had a whole business. Like, so my mom was a teacher, and so I would go to school and sell like these, because we had chickens. So I would like sell these chicken eggs to all her like colleagues. Yeah. And I made I was like 11 years old, and I bought my first dog, which was like $1,500 and like a really expensive saddle, like all cash, just from selling chickens.
Tack is not cheap.
I'd say from a young age. Yeah, and like I worked my first job. I was an instructor at a horse camp by where I lived, and I worked that job for 4 years, starting when I was 11. And I was working like probably some very illegal like child labor, like violating every child labor law. But I worked a lot, and so it was just kind of like from a young age, it was like that's kind of what we did. And my family, like I will say that it was very like, you're gonna do something, like a lot of people kind of give me crap because my pop culture knowledge is terrible because we didn't really watch like a ton of TV growing up.
Yeah.
Because if it was sunny out, they're like, you're outside, like go outside. You can't be watching TV if it's sunny. In Washington, it's not sunny.
It's a dying breed. It's a dying breed. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I'd say like part of it was instilled, and then part of it was just like as young as I can remember. It's just kind of that's what I did. And then once I stopped riding horses, it was like, well, if I'm going to do something, like I don't want to I want to be the best at it. So as soon as I started wrestling, like people were like, oh, well, how did it take off that quick when you started later? But for me, it's not like I was this person who I wrestled for 3 months and then took the rest of the year off. It was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like every day I'm going to do something to get closer to that. So that's what kind of I did from the jump.
So let's talk about where you started. Freshman year, what was that? Obviously you had a high school team, I take it, right? Or were you on the boys team?
Yeah. So Washington is a sanctioned women's wrestling state since 2008. So we were like one of the first to actually sanction it.
Texas,
so I always competed. Yeah, I competed against girls, but most of my training partners were guys. Like we didn't have like a full women's team by any stretch of the imagination. I'd say most years like it was like 5 or 6 girls, and then towards the end of my high school career, it kind of grew and grew as things got bigger with the sport. But yeah, so like I always think competing, like people always think there's like this advantage to competing against guys when you're younger. And I think people like have done extremely well competing against guys out of necessity. Mm-hmm. But guys are also different, like they aren't as flexible. They're a lot more strong. Like, and I did wrestle in some guys tournaments and stuff, but it's just a different style of wrestling. So I always thought like, being able to wrestle girls on a state level. And then, I started, like I went to my first national tournament like a year and a half after I started wrestling. So getting exposed to that pretty early on was like really key. So I think some people now that women are competing against women, they're like, oh, well, they're not going to be as good because they're not wrestling the boys. And it's like, well, they could be better, like
so wrong.
I think there's going to be more opportunities, more things like that, right? So it's funny always hearing all the banter that people have to say about it.
So I remember when, and this is girls wrestling was already I think we already sanctioned it in Wisconsin, but Liam had wrestled against Carly Keschker. I don't know if you had met Carly yet. She'd been out at some of the camps out there, but I think she's a junior or senior this year. I can't remember what grade she's in.
Yeah.
But you know how boys are. They're about to wrestle a girl, especially nowadays. And if they're at a highly competitive tournament, they're going to be like, oh, I got this. And I looked at Carly. I didn't know Carly at that point yet, but I told Liam, I was like, well, then you have a game plan still. You can't just go out without a game plan. And he didn't score a point in the first period because Carly was prepared and she knew what she was doing. And after that first period, I said, how you feeling now? So you going to actually go for it now or what? Because all these kids were still kind of under the impression yet that, well, I've been doing this for this long, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't know what they're doing when they're practicing. You don't know what they're doing when they're training. You're not there. Like you said, it wasn't like you went for 3 months. It was something that you liked and you kept doing it and kept doing it. So when you got to that point, when you first started and you got into the high school wrestling room, what did you think of it when you first stepped on the mat?
Yeah, it's weird. I really liked it like right away. I know most people are like, oh, I hated wrestling for a while, but like right from the jump, I just thought it was like the most fun thing I'd ever done. And also like, I just knew I had this almost like deja vu epiphany where I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Yeah. Like, this is just what I'm meant to be doing. So pretty much after that, I took it like really serious from the get-go and everything. But yeah, I definitely didn't go through the typical like, oh, I hated it or like, I sucked for the first season. It was pretty right away for me. And also I came from horses, which it's like a big money sport, like there's sometimes I'd get beat by girls in the horse world where like they would, it's just because their parents had like 50 grand to shell out on a new horse or they wouldn't even ride their horses in between competition. They would just send it to the trainer. The trainer would fix all their horses' problems for them and they'd get it back in time for the next competition, right? So going from that to a sport where it's like you can kind of determine your own destiny was like really refreshing for me.
It's second nature. You're kind of rolling into a situation you kind of already knew. So, and I remember when I was younger, I dated a girl who actually she showed Clydesdales, which was pretty intimidating. And she took me out in the field and there's like, I don't know, it's like 20 of them, Scottish Clydesdales and American Clydesdales, and sitting at the end, She said, stand right here. And then she went to the end. She chased him towards me. And she's like, but don't move. She goes, they'll go around you. I was like, what do you mean they'll go around me? I had no idea what she was doing. I stood there and practically peed my pants while I was watching horses sprint at me. And it's a difficult sport. I mean, when you're talking about these girls getting all these remedies fixed, whereas you're probably more in tune with your horse and that half-ton beast, that's ready to run and go as soon as you tell it to go. You have a little more you're in tune with that. So now with wrestling, you really have to be in tune with yourself and kind of figuring yourself out, which I would think now coming from that world seems like, well, I know me, right? So what did you find out about yourself now getting into wrestling? What were you starting to figure out?
Yeah, that first year, I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing at all.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really have any kind of technique, but I just had like a lot of will. So I think I ended up finishing, and Washington girls states are actually pretty tough. Like my first year that I won state was my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
And in that bracket, I had a girl that went on to be an NAIA runner-up. I had myself and then 2 other Fargo champions just in that bracket alone. So to win state for a girl, like you actually had to go at least, I don't know how it is now. I think they split it into 2 divisions, but back then it was just 1 division, like, best person in the state at the weight. And it was really tough. So I think I finished like 6th my first year, having no clue what I was doing. And then I found my coach, Andy Cook, who coached me in high school and into college and stuff. And I kind of just told him, I was like, yeah, like, I don't really know what I'm doing, like kind of just getting into this world. And I, this is like kind of what I want to do. And so I went to a practice, actually. He had just gotten back from Fargo. So it was like summer after my first year of wrestling. And I wrestled, actually, our room was insanely competitive. The club room I went to, it was called Bandit. And it was myself and Brenda Reyna, who is a national champ, who was my teammate at McKendree.
Yep.
And then there's this guy called Mason Phillips, who he went to, I think he just graduated from North Carolina, but he was multiple time Fargo champ, Super 32 champ, really good, and just supernatural. We had Dom Damon, who was a Greco World Team member. He's at NMU still, and so we just had a lot of good kids. And I went in that first practice, and Andy was kind of just walking around, but I was wrestling Mason and this other pretty good guy, and I would still get beat, but I would like sneak in a takedown every once in a while, and I was kind of like holding my own to a certain degree. And Andy came up to me after the practice and was like, "What's your goals?" And I was like, "Oh, like I want to be a state champ." And he's like, "No, like you need to think like a lot bigger than that. Like you need to be focused on like winning a world title." And I didn't even know at the time. I was like, they have world titles for this? Like I had no idea. But then with him, things took off kind of pretty quick. And what he really gave me was like the technique side of things. And then within a year and a half of starting wrestling, like with Andy's help and all that, I actually won Folks on Nationals like a year and a half after I started. So I'd say things took off like fairly quick.
Pretty quick.
At first it was me just kind of willing my way to like takedowns and stuff. And
I
was like, oh, I actually like know the technique to this and stuff. So
it's nice. Well, I guess you're not really the only one I talked to that has, and I wouldn't say as quick as success, but even talking to Coach Randy Miller, I mean, she started super late as well. And kind of had a little bit of a climb. I wouldn't say that she was winning a national tournament like a year after she started, but she had a pretty decent climb, pretty decent progression. Now, with that being said, a lot of it, obviously there's, like you were saying, high school. Sometimes you would run into brackets or whatever that were super small, or one year you would only have so many, girls out, things like that. So right now you guys are dealing with a slew of different, ups and downs demographically that happen as far as just numbers and counts of women that are out for wrestling. But when it comes to the skill level, I think we have hit like almost the lottery when it comes to the skill level of the girls and women that are out for wrestling right now, because we're watching so much high level, and these, you included, a lot of you girls have not been wrestling that long. So it speaks to me I used to coach soccer, and to me, it's a lot easier to coach women. It's just so much easier.
Yeah.
The attention span is it's going to come and go with just age groups and stuff like that. But as far as just the mentality, and I think the focus of women, especially from the age of a freshman all the way through college, is just 10 times different than what a guy's is. I mean, obviously they say that our brains don't mature until we're 25. I wouldn't say that mine didn't mature that late, but anyways, with women, though, it just seemed to be a lot easier. Things seemed to click with them a lot easier. It just seemed like things tend to manage themselves a little easier, whereas boys are a little more scatterbrained. So did you find it a challenge as that year was going on before, that first national tournament, really to get a grasp of, I guess, mature partners, not to put anybody down, but just to say that, I'm trying to wrestle with this guy because it feels like it would be a great partner, but it's not working because I can't get him to focus with me, kind of thing. Was that a challenge at all for you?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge for me, and it really didn't happen till after that freshman year, after I started doing like club wrestling, my focus was freestyle pretty much as soon as I met Andy. He was like, from here on out, your main focus is freestyle. He's like, you can wrestle folk during high school season, but we're training freestyle, so that's what I did. And I didn't have the greatest high school coach. He was just not, to give you context, he got fired for I think verbal abuse, or got let go under some very not great circumstances after I left the program. But it just wasn't fantastic. So basically I wasn't allowed to help any of the other girls with any technique. So if they said, oh, how are you doing this ankle pick? I would just have to be like, sorry, I'm not allowed to help you, or things like that. Yeah. So I ran into just some pretty, and then basically if I did a different, so obviously I was learning wrestling outside of the room. I was traveling to different camps, doing these things, trying to further my own opportunities in the sport. And so if I did, say we were drilling doubles and I did a slightly different setup that I had learned elsewhere, I would have to do burpees or conditioning. And it was it was just not a very great environment. So I ended up leaving that program after my sophomore year and moving back. Cause I started in Acme in that small town, and we had actually moved to Everson, which is really close. But, our actual old property, there was this huge risk of a landslide taking it out. So my parents basically had to sell it to the county to be able to retire, hopefully in the future. It was this whole situation. But after that, we were able to move back to Acme to a different house. And I joined the wrestling program at the school I grew up at.
Yeah.
And they were really positive. I still go back in the room, whenever I'm home and try and help them and stuff. So really what I ran into more in high school was just hard time, I think, when coaches, and especially when you live in a small town with very small town mentality, people see you trying to do something that's not really in the norm. I couldn't tell you anyone that I grew up with that went on to be a significant D1 athlete, let alone a professional athlete. And so it just wasn't really normal. Most people stay after high school, they get married, they live there their whole lives. That's the very prescribed culture. And so when you kind of challenge that, I had people being why are you still wrestling? Season's over. I'd have guys come up to me and be like, how many roids are you doing today? Stuff like that, with that kind of culture. But then when you start doing well, right? So I won state, and then I won a national tournament pretty close after that. Then people they just change their tune pretty quickly. I think it, and that's kind of more, back when I was wrestling in high school, there was only 6 sanctioned states. So it was still on the upswing. So I think girls in general, my experience, I don't think is the only one like that. I think, you run into this opposition until people see oh wow, women are coachable. They can take what they learn and apply it in these tournaments and do well, pretty quickly. And so it's a lot of friction at first. And then once people kind of see, they're normally okay, I can get with this just like any other women's sport, right? So I think I definitely met a lot of friction at first from coaches and people in my community, and then it got better as time went on.
So did it take a long time just in your area alone? Because I mean, it's a pretty big state and there are a lot of small towns in Washington. Did you find that girls, when girls sports in general came around the area, like a new one, were people, I guess, opposed? Why are we doing this? This is just fine. Did they argue it when a lot of those opportunities started to come around for just girls in general, not even just one sport, but new things pop up? And I came from a fairly small town, and so did my wife. And that when certain things come up, it's just because, it's the basketball coach is bitching about it because now he's not getting enough money to his program. But sometimes the community can be like that and just be like, well, why are we doing this? We have the basketball team, we have the football team, and the normal everyday type things.
Yeah.
What did that community kind of bite back a little bit when some of those things came around?
I'd say for the mainstream sports, no. Okay. I'd say that it was kind of very accepted, and in general, Washington's a very progressive state as far as I think women's stuff comes along in general. So as far as some things, it was more progressive than you'd probably see elsewhere. I'd say like wrestling, it was still very like, even my parents, like they weren't super. I basically told them I wasn't serious about it, but I was like, well, it's either wrestling or cheerleading, knowing they hated cheerleading or let me wrestle, and they did. And
right.
But yeah, they were like, what do you mean you're gonna go wrestle with guys? And and I think that's what makes Washington such a great state when it comes to women's wrestling, is like the barrier to entry is a lot lower, because parents who aren't involved in the sport, they're not going to most of the time send their daughter to an all guys sport where like she's likely just going to get beat up a little bit. Whereas like for me, at least, it was like, oh, I'm wrestling with girls. There's other girls on the team. There's other like it has our own state tournament. So I'd say like there was good things going for it in my community. It was definitely like there wasn't any like women in sports kind of examples from anywhere where I was from, where it was like, oh, this is like a real opportunity you can have. It was kind of like, what do you mean? At best, it's like people would go to Wazoo or UW, and that was like the big deal in my community, basically.
Right on. And again, Washington's a large state, a beautiful state. I love it there. So it's not to say that anything about Washington is against women's sports, but you get those little communities, you get those little sects here and there that are just kind of like, no, we don't need that. And, shut things out. So it's just
definitely pushed back.
Yeah. Just kind of curious, like I talked to Caitlin Kelly the other day, super small town. She's from Florence, Niagara, so small. Those two towns had to join to make a sport because there's not enough kids. But it's funny because she knows how small it is. And she knows how, kind of the things that are missing that you're not getting from those, I guess, the small towns that you are in. She had to travel so far to get to a club, things like that. So with that being said, as you started to go along now and you guys moved towns, how often were you challenged, I guess, now that you've gone? Were you in a better room, better coach? People had an understanding what was going on. Did you guys do some research on it? You knew of this place? Did you move there for a reason, or did you guys just move because you had to get out of the avalanche range?
Yeah. So when we moved in, can you still hear me? My headphones died, unfortunately.
I can. You're just a little muffled. You're good.
Okay.
She's rearranging.
That will help. I'm not sure, but I'll just speak a little bit louder. But yeah. So when we moved to Everson initially, I was still riding horses. I wasn't wrestling like at all.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't on the radar when we moved there, like, oh, this wrestling program isn't as good as where I grew up, which is true. The place where I grew up, they were actually like multiple time like girl state champs, like so really good like wrestling in high school from where we had grown up in Acme initially.
Okay. Yeah.
And then kind of I had known the Baker coaches just because my mom still worked at that school district. She had known them for a long time. And so like we knew they were good people and that they would allow me to like be myself really and like still like achieve these higher goals and things that I wanted to do while still helping the team do what we wanted to do as far as like the high school season went. So they were just very supportive, very understanding, and I knew going there it was like, okay, they may not have a ton technically that they can teach me or these like crazy things elevate me, but they're going to let me go get the coaching that I need, and they're going to let me go to the tournaments I need to go to. So a lot of it is just like, I think I tell girls this with college wrestling too, is like find coaches who are okay with not knowing everything, and then being like, hey, you should go because you can learn a lot more than I can teach you. And I think that was the struggle when I first moved to Nooksack and when I first started wrestling, is like kind of when I had outgrown the prescribed technique. It wasn't like, hey, you should be going to these things to like keep progressing. It was like, well, why isn't this good enough for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you got there, it was your junior year, right? Is when you got to this new school? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've made some noise and you're having, obviously you're liking, wrestling, you're in high school. Were you starting to get like maybe some words from colleges like, hey, we saw you here, we'd like to have you come down for a camp? Or what was that like for you? Kind of with the, I guess, the newness to the country, not necessarily to Washington, but the newness to the country of the sport, especially to colleges. How was that rolling out for you at that time?
Yeah, so women's college recruiting has gone like a long way since I was younger. Like when I was younger, it was pretty much on you like sometimes coaches would reach out and stuff, but even when you were having like a lot of success, most of the time it was like you kind of approached them. That was like they didn't have like a recruiting system or anything. So, and also my coach Andy, who I had started wrestling with, he had been coaching at a college called Grays Harbor College, and it was just like a community college in Washington. But he had gotten like Ronna Heaton was there with him, Becca Leathers was there. So kind of some bigger name girls were, and they had finished in like their first year of the program, like 7th in the combined WCWA tournament when it was still like not separated into NCAA and NAIA. So they finished pretty well at like a good tournament, like their first year, and we were set to come in the year following. And then Andy ended up leaving that job. So I originally was going to follow Grays Harbor at least for like the first 2 years and just kind of stay developing with him. And then that was the plan up until like my end of my senior year. And then that kind of fell through, and I was already living at the training center my senior year of high school. And so I just decided to do like a gap year and kind of ran into a bunch of injuries that year and anything. So it ended up working out pretty fine anyways. But I'd say back then it was a very different recruiting process. Like now when I went through the recruiting process a second time, when I like left McKendree, I had like 30 coaches calling me the day I released a statement saying I was leaving. When you were in high school, you know, at that time, it just wasn't as common. You get like kind of the top programs would like give you a call, but at the same time, it was like you would have to like make it known that you were looking. You know?
Right on. Okay, so with that, were there? We're going to back up just a little bit. How many state titles did you get as a girl?
So I won state my sophomore and junior year, and then I moved to Wyoming Seminary my senior year to like just pursue.
Oh shit!
Full. Yeah, so I did that my senior year, and then at the end of my senior year, moved to the training center. So that was kind of like my trajectory, because I kind of ran into like my junior year of high school, like pretty much everyone was just running for my weight. It was like hard to find good matches. We had like been bumping me around. I bumped up like 20 pounds one time just to get like a decent match. So it was like I knew I was like, you know, if I really want to, you know, get to the next level, like I need to be with girls that can push me more than, you know, I was getting in the high school room, and also with like with wrestling freestyle like year round. So that's why I moved to Sim.
So I kind of touched on a little bit with Kylie, but you know, I talk a lot with Lucas Stout. We do a segment called Parterre. We talk mainly Greco, but the focus, a lot of it is on, for lack of a better term, singling out the sport, right? So guys that are going to do Greco, he's like, if you're going to do Greco, you can't be doing anything else, because you just lose too much information in the in-between that by the time you try to come back and do something, you've already lost weeks, if not months of training. So you had mentioned your senior year going out to the Olympic Training Center. Was there ever discussion of doing that before that even came up, like say your sophomore year?
No, because at the time, so the reason I moved to SEM also, besides just needing a push, was I lived so far out there. I was having to drive like an hour and a half each way to practice. A lot. I mean, I wouldn't even really see my family because they would leave for work in the morning. I would go to school, and then I'd have to go to practice. And by the time I get home, they'd already be in bed. So well, as well be somewhere where like I don't have to drive as much, you know, as a freshly like 18-year-old. But yeah, it was. I think honestly, moving to the training center at a young age, I advise girls against it just because. And now I don't even know if you can because of safe sport rules and stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever, I think it's probably different, but it's just a very adult environment. Like it's a lot of like free reign, which I think is good if you're like. I think I would have done personally pretty okay because I've always like created my own structure, always like kind of I feel like had a decent amount of like personal accountability. But some girls, like, I think have come here and not really like how individual it is.
Yep.
So normally with girls in high school, I'm like, you know, stay close to where you live if you can. But I definitely advise for like full-time freestyle for girls because one, it's like college coaches don't care about girls' state stuff because it's folk style. They just don't really care. Like even if you're a 4-time state champ for whatever state, like it's not going to matter to them. You making the cadet world team or you know, winning Fargo. Like, those are kind of the important ones. So I always tell girls, like, if you're going to do it, just know that that's just for you and for your own memories to look back on in, like, 20 years.
Right.
As far as, like, it's not like where if you go win Iowa State titles, as a boy, like you're going to get eyes on you. It's just not the same for women because we wrestle freestyle in college, so it just doesn't always translate.
Yeah.
So I was always like, as soon as I met Andy, it was pretty much like, hey, you can train a little folk, but like we're just going to teach you arm bars and stuff from top that can be used in either style. We'll teach you, make sure you can get off bottom, and then besides that, it's all freestyle.
So getting into college, I remember hearing about McKendree quite a bit. I want to say it was about time you were in there. I think, if I remember correctly, I think McKendree had gone to the college. There's college national duels in Indianapolis. Did you go to those?
That was the year before I got there. They lost to Campbellsville, correct?
That's right. Yes. Yep. So I saw that team down there. I'd never even heard of the university before that point. And watching some of the collegiate wrestlers go through the process of just training and just the warm-ups that they were doing was interesting. So seeing that school and not knowing, what was going on and kind of finding out more about the coaching staff and seeing that the level that women's wrestling had gotten to, because at that point I really had only seen like girls high school wrestling and things like that. I hadn't really witnessed a college level like wrestling match at all with girls. So it was nice to be able to see that. Then seeing the level again. So like I described before, girls are easier to coach, and watching soccer, I just like watching women's soccer more. They play harder. It's a different game, so it's just a different pace the way that they play. So then being able to watch that team wrestle was an eye opener for me specifically, because it was watching, and Liam had not wrestled any women yet as far as the competitions he'd been in. But just watching the level of competition that they're wrestling at already, and some of the girls said that I've only wrestled my junior and senior year of high school, and seeing how much they'd picked up and things like. Did you find that transition going from high school, and you'd been training with a couple people here and there, but did you find the transition from high school wrestling these older women that are in college and possibly have already maybe competed overseas? Was there a big challenge for you in that transition?
I mean, the transition from high school to college is a little different for me because I did do that gap year at the training center. And even though I had like 4 surgeries in the span of that year, I was healthy, like basically from like May until I left for college. And so I did get like a lot of good experience in being around like a lot of the girls and seeing just how like it was to be a professional at this basically. So when I went to college, it was my like was I just needed more experience. I don't think I was that person, who could only wrestle 3 times a year, like a senior level schedule, and do well. I was like, I need to be in more matches and have, more stuff that you can only get by competing. So I need to be in an environment where I can compete more. And so it was very last minute. Pretty much I had some friends out in Illinois, and I hadn't even talked to the McKendree staff or anything at all. I just had figured they were kind of going to be there, and my friends were Zach and Danny Bronigal, and they just took me to McKendree Open Mat, and then the coaches were pretty much like, so what do we need to do to get you here? And I was like, scholarship, I guess. But and then I ended up coming a week late into school. I missed all of syllabus week, which no regrets there. Yeah, things kind of, but from the start, my expectation from the jump was I was just I'm here to win a national title pretty much. And then the only match, I only wrestled 2 seasons in college, and I was there for 2.5 years, but I lost match my freshman year, and just kind of a lot of the girl I had lost to, I actually teched at national duels, and then I lost to her in our duel.
Really?
Just because I had a problem back then where I just had this deeply rooted perfectionism, and my expectations were to go into college and pin and tech everyone, and if anything less than that, then I was deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy. And, for the most part, I did that. I think my freshman year, I had maybe, besides the match I lost, maybe 2 or 3 matches that went the full 6 minutes. And then I ended up teching that same girl I lost to in the national finals period. And then my sophomore year, I think I gave up 1 point all year off a shot clock point. So for the most part, I felt like I did reasonably well, even with high expectations of myself. Yeah. But I definitely own perfectionism as kind of one of my bigger obstacles in that career. But I think women definitely can. You're seeing a lot of girls come out of high school and have pretty immediate success on the college scene because they've wrestled at the world or had a ton of high school experience. And then you do get girls that like, they're like, oh, I didn't start wrestling until my senior year, and it kind of takes them a while longer in college to get to that point where they can contend for a title. So I think it's like everyone's on their own kind of respective journeys, but I think like as a trend, we'll probably see more younger girls coming in and having like an immediate impact.
For sure. So the short time in college kind of leaves a kind of an open gap, I guess, a little bit for me in my brain. But as you get through that, I thought I saw on UWW's was your first competition. It wasn't Bulgaria, was it? Where was your first overseas competition?
Senior level was I wrestled in a Poland Open, but it was really like a bad idea because I was just cleared from elbow surgery.
Oh,
and so when I didn't like, I don't even really count that because afterwards basically my ulnar nerve kept subluxing and I just kind of came back early, and so I had to take like almost 6 to 8 weeks off after that, just rehabbing, just from the fact I was so stubborn and wanted to compete so bad. That was my first senior level. I'd wrestled at like an Austrian Open.
Yeah.
I was at Sam.
Zagreb.
Yeah. And then, the Poland one. And then actually after that, my junior year, because of COVID, we couldn't go to the season thing.
Yep.
My junior year, I competed in Romania like the week before World Team Trials. And that was kind of my first one back. And then my first like major was the Urigan that year after.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So January in 2023. Yeah. And then, yep. So just kind of looking at some of the people that you've wrestled. These are not lightweights at all that you're wrestling, especially just looking at and then the way that you went. A lot of times it seems like you get on a roll. When you get on a roll, it's not stopping, like it seemed like there was some type of thing that happened in there that slowed you down, some outside thing that happened, whether it was an injury or, cause I mean, I've watched you wrestle where your face is unrecognizable. You know what I'm saying? So it's like something major must have happened somewhere in the line, because it just don't like the Forrest Molinari kind of, the first time you met her was just, I think that was just fate. This is what it was. You had to get your hands on her just to wrestle her a little bit.
That World Team Trials, you mean? Like
yes. Yep. So, and then watching you wrestle her the second time was like, it was like you've wrestled her 5 million times before, and that pace, that DeSanto pace that she brings constantly. And it's like, she can never stop going. But and now don't get me wrong, watching, seeing some of the passivities, and they're like, come on. It's hard to not get that called on you though, on a person that wrestles like that, when that's not your style at all. Like you're not, and that's all you're just trying to make a movement to be able to get an angle open for you to do something. And when someone wrestles like that, it's hard.
Yeah. I was surprised. I mean, because normally to get put on the clock twice, you have to be like very, very, very passive.
Right.
I find I only gave up one like takedown, and the rest of the 5 points one was like a finger call.
Yep.
And then clock points in the first match, and then I gave up a shot clock point in the second match, and then I gave up 2 shot clock points again in the third. And like watching it back, I mean, it's like the refs, like you said, they're always gonna, because it looks like if you were just watching without like knowing wrestling, you're like, oh, that person. Even the announcer was like, oh, clearly trying to be the more dominant wrestler. But how I always saw it is like, I knew I was probably going to eat some shot clock points just because of her style. And I like the way I see it, and nothing against Forrest, but like hard collar ties and pushing people around, unless you're pushing them out or unless it leads to a takedown, that's not any points yet. You know? It's like, it's just a precursor to a wrestling move. So I was like, if you want to do that, and, I'm going to make sure it doesn't lead to any like points on the scoreboard. But besides that, like, kind of go for it. And so I knew, I was like, they're probably going to put me on the clock a lot. I don't know if I was expecting quite that much, especially because in some of the matches, like I was like digging underhooks and stuff, and normally like that's seen as a very dominant position if you have an underhook as far as like that kind of thing. So I was a little surprised, but not greatly surprised. Well,
it's like in that last match, the two of the best of three in Vegas, I thought I saw it was like in the first 30 seconds they called one. And I think it was that they gave you the passive. I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, shit, it's been the same match the past 2 times. nothing's different. You guys didn't call it before. So it was almost like they were just adding up all the time that she was doing that. And that's where I was thinking the same way you were. You're not scoring that way. I mean, you're just giving them attention one way, but you're not really scoring because she got the 1 point, but then you got 2 and then she got a 1. So it's like you're working double hard for 1 point when you could have been putting that work towards a shot and trying to get 2 points out of that. But it's a mentality. That's how they wrestle. I mean, Liam has a certain way that he wrestles, and it's, you don't get in there. Yeah. We don't get in your guys' way after a while. We just try to wind you up and let you go and kind of help you figure it out in between. So she's a great wrestler. Forrest Molinari has been on the world team. I mean, what, two times, 3 times now, or whatever it is. But to watch you beat and to win that one, just because, like I said, watching you wrestle her before, those were some of the couple matches that I watched, because being able to see you up close, I wanted to see what that was like before all that happened, just to kind of notice the differences. And you were way more collected. I didn't notice a look of panic on your face. Like, I mean, because I would be too. I mean, someone's coming with that pace. It's not like every day I wrestle someone like this, so it's different. And it's like, you just had your shit together and you handled her. And especially in that first match, was that 6-2, 5-2? I think you said.
I think it was 6-2 when they called me for like something. So it might've been 6-3 by the time things were said and done, but yeah. Yeah.
Just once I saw that, it was in the second match, didn't even matter. I was like, whatever. She probably needed a break. She's going to be able to hold off this third match, and she's got it. So it was very fun to watch that. And when you, with the work that you've put in, this isn't new, you're not new to this situation. You're not new to the circumstances. What were you thinking kind of leading into the US Open? I know some people, there's always speculation of this person's going to show up and they're going to do this and this person. Were you kind of shutting out noise? Were you kind of leaving all this is what I'm doing? I mean, because obviously you went to a different weight, so it's a lot of outside noise gets shut out.
Yeah, I mean, 65 is definitely more of my, like, natural weight, it's more 68, like, it's, I walk around, like, 66 and a half, so it's, like, It's not a huge stretch, like, I'm like, oh my god, I'm tiny, like, it's fine, a kilo and a half. For me, I was just kind of like, that's the obvious choice for me to go up after the US Open, but leading into the Open, it was tough because, so the reason I'm wearing these sunglasses and stuff, and I have these colored contacts and things, and I can see, is I've been dealing with like really bad migraines, and we don't really know why they started, other than the fact that I've had neck surgery. I have an ongoing neck injury that I deal with, and
oh boy,
that I'll eventually get a second surgery for. And so we're like, maybe that's why they started. But for a while, it was like really kind of not sure, and I was having like migraines like over 20 days every month, and like really challenging. I mean, when you have like a migraine, like bright lights for me are always my biggest trigger. So to be in the wrestling room under like really bright fluorescent lights, and then competing under fluorescent lights, like at the Open, I didn't have contacts yet, so it was always like really tough for me because I would be there and then just dealing with like all these kind of symptoms from that. So luckily I found a neurological optometrist, and I have a neurotherapist, and they've been like really helpful, and they have found all sorts of great stuff for me, and really have allowed me to like continue to compete and stuff, despite something that's definitely not super optimal. So going into Vegas, I was still really learning how to figure all of that out, and it was my first competition where I had really kind of like, man, I'm gonna have to figure out how to deal with this issue, and I hadn't really dealt with it in a 2-day tournament. So the first day, like, my symptoms were great, and I was like feeling good, and then the second day, just either from getting my head knocked around or being under the lights, woke up with a lot of migraine symptoms. So we kind of had to, after the Open, like reevaluate and be like, okay, how are we gonna manage this? And luckily, my neurological optometrist, his former professor, owns this company called like Atlas, and they make these like colored contacts for athletes. Like a lot of them are like football athletes or probably soccer players, people that play outside and can't wear like glasses when they're playing. So it was a trial run, and we're like, we'll just test it out. And it worked really well at welcome trials. I felt like my symptoms were a lot better. I wasn't dealing with as much of the headache stuff that I had been, and migraines too. Like for me, it's always like nausea, headaches, and you feel just very disoriented, almost like you're trying to wrestle but like underwater.
Wow.
So it's a while for me to really figure out how to like manage that, and it's not perfect now. Like I still have some days, but I'm on some better medication. I still keep my neurological, things are kind of like coming together. So that's been really great. But at first I was like, I had never even had a headache in my life. So to go from that to like all of a sudden having these headaches, like, and all this stuff, most of the time was like really, really tough. And so I think like people, they're like, oh, the progression through the season. And I think part of it was definitely like, my wrestling and figuring things out tactically and just continuing to get better and progress on a wrestling level. But a lot of it was like figuring out how to manage this, where like my biggest, problem is bright lights, and what do we do is like compete under like the brightest lights you can. It was definitely like a learning curve for me.
Okay. So and I can relate. I mean, I deal with these things called cluster headaches. So they're like a step above migraines, and there's like no rhyme or reason for them. It's not light sensitivity, it wasn't sound sensitivity. It was just there. And I'm pacing, holding my head, sweating. I can't lay down. So when I do lay down, I put something on my neck because that's where a lot of the pain's coming from. So it's very disoriented. Like you said, you're disoriented. You don't know why it's happening. And shit, stepping into a wrestling room could be the last time you step into a wrestling room because you don't know why anything's going on. You don't know what's causing it. So that can be a scary time. And to be able to think of, well, I got to get to this weight, or I got to get to this, and then I got to do this. It's a lot added on. So, I mean, it's just props to someone to be able to kind of sit through and be able to figure that out and still want something bad enough to go through that.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely challenging at times. And like, I mean, pretty much if it was like I had surgery scheduled for after Final X, and like, Final X didn't go the way I planned, I was just going to get healthy and stuff for next year. And just kind of like, okay, I took my time, come back, and then, be ready. And I figured, I was like, I think Final X is going to go well, and I don't think it'll be my last tournament. But it was tough because I was like, surgery may help, my headaches, it may not. We don't really know until eventually when I get it down the line. And I can manage my condition and stuff, and it's like, for the most part, manageable. I'm sure, as you get those days where your symptoms are really bad, and you're like, man, I don't care what I have to do. I just want this to not be happening anymore. So there were definitely days that were really bad when I'm like, man, I'd give anything just to not be in this situation right now. And even going to Final X, Final X was on Saturday, and Wednesday, like to Saturday, I pretty much had really bad, just super bad symptoms. And my medication that I take, when they start happening, just kind of stopped working. And so the only thing we could find to really manage it was I would get several days out of relief after getting my eyes dilated, which is just like a super offhand, and it's an off-label use of the medication, but for some reason it worked for me. And so under medical supervision, that's what I had to do. And it was crazy because I had to do it like the morning of Final X, and so I wouldn't get really bad headaches. So I was going to work, and I'm like, I can't really see who's there, but then of course like your vision kind of comes back full force after a few hours. So when it was time to warm up, like I was good to go. But it was just, dude, I kind of it was definitely. But I was like, this goal is worth it to me, and I'm just gonna keep going. And no matter how Final X works out, like I'm like, I'm either just gonna get healthy, or I'm gonna go try and win a world title in either of those. And, I just had a lot of peace knowing, like, either way, like it's not gonna change who I think I am or my wrestling abilities. Obviously I want to go out and win the match and be on the world team. So I was glad I was able to make it happen at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that attitude. It's and I'm 45, and I just started playing soccer again, and I wasn't even playing yet, and I was just shooting in my hamstring, right in that crotchal region. Just all of a sudden, my hamstring just said, "Hey, I'm going to pull a little bit and stretch." And I've been playing soccer since I was 5 years old. I've been making that kick since I was 8. Same kick I've been doing, and I just went through and did everything. The fact that you talking about headaches, talking about all the other issues, I didn't even want to get up to go to work where I sat in a desk the next day because I knew I was going to have to get up and go to the bathroom. Whereas you guys are talking about, well, I went to a tournament, I'm going to go climb a mountain. I had just had headaches, just got my eyes dilated. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to probably wrestle a tournament a couple days after, a couple hours after. It says a lot. It says a lot about character, and it says a lot about what you're trying to accomplish. So I have nothing but respect for that. With that being said, though, what's the next goal here? Where's the next stop?
Yeah, so we're going to the ranking tournament next month in Hungary. And so for me, I always like to try to take things one tournament at a time. And so I kind of take things in blocks. So I'm kind of in like a more of a like training, learning block right now leading into that tournament. I'll kind of make adjustments based off how that goes, what goes well, continue to develop, and then we'll kind of use that to game plan for Worlds and everything. And I think like a cool thing is like, none of the girls at 68. I've wrestled maybe a few that have gone up from 65, but not a ton of girls in the field have actually wrestled, and so they haven't felt some of the things I do. I mean, a lot of my domestic opponents, like I've wrestled now like 10 times. Me and Macy have wrestled a lot of times.
Yeah.
Boris 7 times
Yep.
now. So it's like the part of the domestic scene that's tough is just the familiarity aspect of like, you're not really going to have anything secret anymore. So it's kind of like who can get to their stuff first. Whereas overseas, I'm excited to like see how my stuff works against kind of a different field. And obviously, the goal is to go win Worlds and get to sit out to. If that doesn't happen for some reason, I'll be going to. So really, those are kind of the things on the immediate future. But yeah, I'm just trying to kind of take what I learned from Final Round. My coaches have kind of gone over some of the positions. Like the position in the second match that cost me was that like quad pod position, and so just kind of going over those, fixing those, and then going into the ranking tournament, and then we'll kind of do the same thing, right? Like what went well, what continues to be developed, and then there's some things that I'm developing long term where it's like, okay, I started doing this, and it's going to be something that's probably not going to come together by the next tournament, but it's just part of my arsenal that I'm trying to expand. And I mean, that's something that I've kind of developed over the recent years is like my shin wizard. I have like really weirdly stuff. That's something I always had, and it's not like when I was first learning it, I was like, okay, by the next tournament I'm gonna have it down. It's like, okay, we're building this like long term. So I have a couple of things that, okay, over the long term, I'd like to get good at this.
Well, if Forrest isn't able to plow through your shin wizard like I watched in those other 3 matches, I think you're doing all right on the shin wizard. I think it's working pretty good. I think you guys are down in that spot for like a good 30 seconds. Had to have been 30, 35 seconds. I was like, the hand's got to break after a while, right? I mean, you can only hold on for so long. Nope. You held on the whole damn time. And then she thought she got one after that. And I'm like, nope, you guys are grounded, man. You guys are like knee bound the whole way. And I think she was kind of getting to that point. Like, I'm not getting a takedown. I got to try and push out because you were not letting go of that shin wizard. It was awesome. So I appreciate your time. We've been going for about an hour. And I guess, honestly, I could so much garbage down here. I'm trying to refurbish this table. I'm trying to redo a bunch of stuff, but I appreciate your time and being able to sit with us. It's exciting to have you on board and talking about where you've been, where you've come from. I think it's, again, like I told you before, I think it's very important to get you guys, especially with the women in the sport, exposure. I am drawn to people who are doing exceptional things that have come from a long way. Everybody works hard. It's not to say that everybody works hard, but I notice these people and kind of the little things that have been going on, the people that they've beaten that I know was a huge goal. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out for me, and I appreciate you taking out the time tonight. I wish you nothing but luck coming up. If you have any plugs, anybody that you want to shout out to, give them a shout out now, because I'm telling you what, we're in about 178 countries. So someone might hear you.
Yeah, I mean, just shout out to my coach Izzy. He's been really great. He's coached me and Farah, he coached Mensa, he's just coached, so many great athletes. So I really, like, when I got here, when I moved back last January, I just really tried to buy into his philosophy and stuff, and he's, stuck by you when things have gone well and things haven't gone well, and so I'm just really grateful.
Right on. Well, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to start up our music here, but I do want to talk to you quick before I let you go, because I do have questions about those contacts. You've sparked interest in my brain for my son, so I have some questions. But with that being said, this has been another episode of the Vision Quest podcast. I appreciate everybody who listens for joining. Check it out on Spotify. Check it out on Apple Podcasts. On like 9 other different places and all that other stuff. It's just out in there. But thank you, everybody. Pay attention for the next episode coming up. I believe we're going to be talking to Frank Jasper, aka Shoot, because the guy is the man. Did you know that he has a master's degree in Chinese nutrition? What? Fuck, mind blown when I talk to the guy. You got to talk to him sometime, because he's working with Nick Siriano, and the results are phenomenal because they're working for my kid too. But with that, see you guys later. Thanks, Emma. I'm going to talk to you in a minute. All of our episodes are brought to you by Appleton Tattoo, located at 117 South Appleton Street in Appleton, Wisconsin, right off the main drag on College Avenue. You can't miss them.
I've had some work done. I have a Celtic cross that covers my back that was done by Jason. We're not done yet. Jason Winans and crew, the artists that he have there, those guys are the best in the Fox Valley. They are definitely one to go to if it's something that you've just been kind of throwing around. They'll make you feel comfortable. It's a very clean environment, very nice crew, and very willing to get done whatever you need done when you need it done. You can message them on Facebook. I know they're on Facebook. You can give them a call at 920-604-8289 and get in touch with Jason Winans and crew at Appleton Tattoo, located again in Appleton, Wisconsin at 117 South Appleton Street, right in Appleton. Very flexible hours, great crew, clean environment again. I would not send you anywhere else except for these guys. Appleton Tattoo.